I first met Aisha at a close friend's wedding, the kind of event where faces blur in the rush of music, chatter, and endless cups of tea. She stood out instantly, not because of a grand entrance or flashy dress, but because she carried herself like she belonged in every room she walked into. There was a confidence in the way she adjusted her dupatta, in the way she laughed at the jokes of people she barely knew. I caught myself looking at her more than once, not with any intention beyond curiosity and quiet admiration. She had a presence that made it hard to simply glance away and move on. It happened when she was standing in front of a mirror, fixing a loose strand of hair. My eyes drifted toward her without me realizing it. She noticed, and in that split second I panicked. I looked away too quickly, feigning interest in the flower arrangement on the table beside me, as if that could erase the fact that I had been watching her. She turned, her lips curving into a smile that was both playful and knowing. "Next time if you want to look," she said, her voice carrying just enough volume for me to hear clearly. "Just ask. No bad acting." My ears felt warm, but I didn't look away this time. Something about the way she said it wasn't confrontational. It was a tease, an invitation to own my moment instead of hiding behind awkwardness. I met her gaze and without thinking much replied, "Blind, trust me." The words slipped out before I could polish them, but I didn't regret them. They hung in the air for a second, and she tilted her head slightly, as though trying to read what exactly I meant. She didn't press for an explanation, and I didn't offer one. The rest of the evening went on as weddings do. Groups forming, conversations looping between nostalgia and small talk, music filling in the pauses. But in my mind, that short exchange replayed in different tones. Her smile had been genuine, and my response, though unplanned, felt like something deeper than a quick comeback. I didn't know her well enough to understand why, but the phrase "blind trust" felt like a seed planted in that moment. Later, when I saw her again in passing, she gave me a slight nod, the kind you give to someone you've shared an unspoken understanding with. I realized that while everyone else was busy making memories of the wedding through group photos and dances, mine had been carved out in a two-sentence conversation with a girl I barely knew. I didn't know if I would see her after this night or if our paths would fade into the crowd's haze, but I knew that her straightforwardness had left an imprint. I left the wedding thinking less about the event itself and more about how someone could so effortlessly cut through pretense with a single line, and how my own answer might have been the start of something I didn't yet recognize. After the wedding, I didn't expect our connection to go beyond that brief exchange, but a few days later a group chat was made for sharing wedding photos and jokes from the event. She was in it, and our first messages outside that night were casual replies to the same memes everyone else was laughing at. Gradually, direct messages began. At first about random things from the group, then drifting into small pieces of our daily lives. There was no formality in how it started, just a natural flow that felt easy. One evening she mentioned she was working on a college project presentation and was stuck on the visual layout. Without thinking much, I offered to help. We spent an hour going back and forth with ideas, exchanging voice notes and links. She appreciated the effort, and I realized how comfortable she was letting me in on something that mattered to her. It was the first time I noticed trust wasn't something she handed out lightly, but when she did, it came without hesitation. In return, she became a small but steady part of my day. When a work deadline had me running on barely any sleep, she stayed on the phone longer than usual, talking about completely unrelated things just to distract me from the pressure. She didn't try to solve my problems, she simply reminded me to breathe and laugh. That kind of presence, quiet, consistent, meant more than grand gestures could. Her sense of humor never let me forget our first meeting. Every now and then she'd slip in a playful remark like, "Careful, I might catch you staring again," or "No bad acting this time." It didn't come across as repetitive. Instead, it became a light thread woven into our growing friendship. Each time she said it, I caught myself smiling because it brought me back to the moment where this all began. A few weeks later, she was invited to a cousin's engagement party and sent me photos of different dresses, asking which one she should wear. She made it sound casual, but I understood what it meant. Letting someone's opinion influence how you present yourself is a subtle form of trust. I picked one without overthinking and told her it suited her the best. She chose it and later told me it had been the right call. By then, the phrase blind trust that I had said on impulse started to feel like a theme quietly defining our interactions. She didn't question my intentions, and I didn't doubt her sincerity. It wasn't about grand declarations. It was about the steady rhythm of showing up for each other in the small, unspoken ways that form the real foundation of any bond. And with every shared laugh and quiet favor, I found myself looking forward to our next conversation, wondering how something so simple could start to feel so significant. It was during a friend's weekend gathering that the first real test of our connection appeared. The atmosphere was light, people laughing and catching up, when someone made a passing joke about seeing me talking to another girl a few days earlier. It was meant to be harmless, but I noticed Aisha's expression change almost instantly. She didn't laugh along. She didn't say anything. The rest of the evening she stayed quieter than usual, responding politely but without her usual warmth. I could have ignored it, but I knew pretending not to notice would only make it worse. Later that night I sent her a message, straightforward and without delay. I told her who the person was, a childhood friend I'd run into by chance, and that the conversation had been nothing more than catching up after years apart. I didn't try to make it sound dramatic or defensive. I just laid out the truth. Her replies came slowly at first, short and careful. She admitted the joke had stuck in her mind, not because she didn't trust me, but because trust is fragile when there's no defined relationship. She wasn't accusing me, but I could hear the uncertainty between her words. I reminded her of every interaction we'd had since we met, how I'd never hidden my intentions, never played games, and always been open with her. If you can't see my heart, I wrote, at least trust the way I've treated you from day one. There was a long pause before she responded. She said she believed me, but also that moments like these are what show whether a connection can hold its ground. I respected that because trust doesn't mean ignoring doubt. It means working through it honestly. The conversation didn't end with grand declarations or sudden emotional closeness. Instead, there was a quiet understanding that we had navigated something that could have turned into distance. The air between us felt lighter again, though still carrying the memory of what had happened. I realized that trust is not a fixed state. It's a choice made over and over, especially when circumstances make it harder to give. After that, she didn't bring up the joke or the situation again. It wasn't about pretending it had never happened. It was about deciding it didn't define us. I noticed a subtle shift in the way she spoke to me in the days that followed. Less guarded, as if I'd proven something without trying to. That night taught me more than any easy, happy moment could have. Words like blind trust sound effortless, but in reality, they're built in moments where it would be easier to walk away than to stay and believe. Weeks later, I decided to do something that would mean more than just a casual meetup. I remembered her mentioning months ago that she loved visiting art exhibitions but rarely found the time. Quietly, I checked schedules, found one that featured the kind of work she admired, and made arrangements so we could go without it feeling overly formal. I didn't tell her where we were headed until we arrived. The look on her face when she realized where we were going told me I had made the right choice. We walked through the gallery slowly, pausing at pieces that caught her attention. She had a way of observing art that mirrored the way she noticed people, taking in the details, seeing meaning where others might just glance and move on. I found myself watching her more than the paintings, not because of habit, but because her expressions felt like their own form of art. She didn't notice at first, but when she did, she turned toward me with a soft smile and said, "You still didn't ask." It was the same line she'd said the night we met, but her tone was warmer now, layered with familiarity and understanding. I smiled back, this time without any hesitation, and said, "By now, you know I only look because I trust my heart, and it's always you." The words felt natural, unforced, as if they had been waiting for the right moment to be spoken. She didn't reply right away. Instead, she held my gaze a second longer than usual, and that silence felt more valuable than anything she could have said. We moved through the rest of the exhibition without rushing, each of us caught in the comfort of knowing we were exactly where we wanted to be. Outside, the evening air carried the faint scent of rain. We walked side by side, talking about nothing in particular, our laughter returning to its usual place between sentences. It struck me how trust had woven itself so deeply into what we shared that we no longer needed to constantly prove it. It simply existed. As I watched her speak about something entirely unrelated to us, I realized that what had started with a playful remark and an awkward response had turned into a steady, unshakable connection. It wasn't built on dramatic gestures or perfect words, but on the accumulation of small, consistent choices to believe in each other. That night, when I dropped her off, there was no need for promises or declarations. We both knew that the strength of what we had wasn't in what we said, but in how we had lived each moment since that first conversation. And as I drove away, I thought about how people call it blind trust, but in truth, it was the clearest vision I'd ever had, seeing her as she was and knowing that was enough.